Again, thank you so much for being with us. We're being joined now by criminal defense attorneys Luke and Brian Sheely, along with Lori Murray here in the Columbia area. We're talking about the guilty plea from former clerk of court Becky Hill in Collington County and how it pertains to the Alex Murdaugh double murder case. Lori, going to begin with you. What did Becky Hill exactly plead guilty to?
She pled guilty to obstruction of justice, 1 count of perjury, and 2 counts of misconduct in office.
But not a guilty plea of jury tampering, which is something Murdaugh's defense team has been talking about for months now.
Yeah, they want everybody to know that she has not been convicted of that because the sentence in this case seems light, I think, to a lot of people. It's an appropriate sentence, but it seems light to a lot of people. They wanted that jury tampering so that they would know for sure that Alex Murdaugh was going to get a new trial, but instead it's going to be left up to the Supreme Court.
You think the sentence was too light?
I don't. I mean, I think, unfortunately, I would love to see her go to prison for this, but as a defense attorney, I can tell you that it's her first offense. This is not a violent offense. So, no, the sentence was appropriate. I think the judge did the right thing.
All right, I want to have Luke and Brian chime in on this as well. Luke, what are your thoughts on all this?
I think she got lucky. It was probably appropriate given everything. Had she been charged and convicted with some sort of jury tampering, I think she would have gone to jail. I think she did get lucky because there certainly was probable cause, and that's all you need to charge. It's just a matter of the special prosecutor, Rick Hubbard, chose not to. And she ended up with these severe charges. Her name has been tarnished, but otherwise you got to look at, well, does she have a criminal record? What does she be doing with her life? And otherwise it's pretty normal kind of upstanding life. So it's a good deal for her, but it's also, I don't think it will necessarily win the day for Alex Murdaugh's defense, but it doesn't hurt. It's kind of a gift that kept on giving.
Brian?
You know, there was probable cause. In the jury tampering hearing before former Chief Justice Toll, I mean, it was evident that there were some witnesses that felt she was trying to influence them. So, I mean, probable cause is something more likely than not. I think Rick Hubbard's comments kind of after the plea was essentially, reading between the lines, there was probable cause, but he chose not to bring that case. Now, he's special counsel appointed by Alan Wilson. Obviously, Alan Wilson himself and his division spent a lot of time prosecuting this case and trying to secure the verdict. The question is the verdict, a clean verdict? Is there a structural problem with the whole jury trial process when a state official like Becky Hill is putting your thumb on the scale of justice back there in the private area that's supposed to be a holy place for the jury to consider without any kind of outside influence? So the state chose not to bring the jury tampering charges. It does not mean the Supreme Court can't take this up. It's really an unforced error. The prosecution obviously did a good job, and then all of a sudden Becky Hill came along, right? So that's something that the defense team did not have before.
All three of you, though, are criminal defense attorneys. So let's talk about if Alex Murdaugh was your client and you were making the argument in February before the state Supreme Court. How would you approach the state Supreme Court with the argument, look, here is Becky Hill, the former clerk of court. She's to be untrusted, or would you use her guilty pleas against her in front of the state Supreme Court? What would you do, Lori?
Well, we have what we call crimes of moral turpitude, and those are the ones that you can use to impeach somebody when they're testifying. These are crimes of moral turpitude. Make no mistake, that these crimes, I think, would come in against her in any court of law. So that'd be what I would put forth to the Supreme Court. This is, these are charges of lying, of stealing money, showing evidence to a reporter that had no business seeing these things, and then lying about it, which is the perjury charge. So perjury and, just the other charges combined show a lack of truthfulness on her part. So you have to give more weight to the jurors who said that she actually did these things. I think you actually have to weight their testimony more than Becky Hill's, if you listen to Becky Hill at all.
It's always nice to Monday morning quarterback, but if I'm arguing the appeal, the Becky Hill situation is not my primary focus. It's the financial crimes, the fact that Alex Murdaugh had to have a whole double murder trial where it's 6 weeks and 4.5 or whatever it was were all about his financial crimes, which for strategy reasons and evidence reasons he had to own up and just be like, wave after wave of, yes, I'm a terrible guy. I'm a flawed, morally terrible human, but I didn't kill my wife and son. So, I mean, there's sound case law, rules of evidence, 404B. You can't be tried for one thing and just be lambasted for another that's completely unrelated. So I think that's the absolute biggest issue for the defense team on appeal. It's the most kind of solid and normal issue, although the Becky Hill stuff is wild and salacious and exciting. I would use that as an ancillary thing and say, look, she's convicted of perjury. She lied to Justice Toll. You can't believe her when she says she didn't tamper with this jury, but I would hammer the financial crimes as being inappropriate in that courtroom.
Brian, at the end of the day, it's the perception, though, from a lot of people out there, oh, Becky Hill pled guilty. She can't be trusted. Would you use that in front of the state Supreme Court?
I think, this is so unique because there was a whole jury tampering hearing before Judge Toll. And, she testified, jurors testified somewhat differently. Some felt she was attempting to influence, some not, but I mean, that's unprecedented, right? So this whole case started out as a unprecedented kind of situation with a respected lawyer and a double murder and then the financial crimes, and then Becky Hill was a ticking time bomb. So I would be strongly arguing that she can't be trusted, that when she told Judge Toll, I did not try to influence them, well, now she's admitting to lying before Judge Toll. So what else was she lying about? So the state selectively decided they didn't feel they had enough evidence to bring jury tampering, but again, they chose that. So I think there's a lot to work with that. And my brother, is thinking about, and my brother has done some appeals and is thinking about the hardcore issues with the, trying to convince a jury that, you didn't kill your family while also admitting that you're a liar and you steal from your clients, right? That's a tough pill. But then we have this Becky Hill bomb that was just motivated by her own personal greed and motivations to, be a celebrity, I presume, it's just unprecedented. So I would be going both ways with it.
The timing of the guilty pleas, though, with Becky Hill coming just a couple of months before the case is going to be heard by the state Supreme Court, is that odd timing?
It's certainly curious. I do want to say that I agree with Sheely number one over here. That is a very important part of this case and this appeal, that the financial crimes, because I don't think that all of those should have come in, and it definitely had some sway with the jury when it shouldn't have. So I think that's a very strong argument for the appeal. But the jury tampering is the sexier part of this appeal. I think everybody wants to see this appeal go through because Becky lied and Becky tampered with the jury. So I definitely think that that both of those have teeth, and we'll be interested to see with the timing of the plea. It's interesting to me because the Attorney General's office, we've been waiting on the Attorney General to bring these charges. We've been waiting on them to prosecute Becky. They charged her, but they did nothing else. So we're waiting on Becky to actually be charged and to show her face in a courtroom. I think if you look at anything to take away from her plea being right now, it's just the fact that she was not charged with the jury tampering. And the judge said, had you been charged with the jury tampering, your sentence would be a whole lot heavier. And that, he's making a comment, letting the Supreme Court know she didn't get charged with jury tampering. So I think that it's there to have an effect on this, but the Attorney General's office hasn't wanted to prosecute her on anything because she's their witness and because it would have an effect on the Murdaugh case. So this plea on this day, the only reason it could be would be to show that there was no jury tampering.
Well, as we mentioned jury tampering earlier, the arguments in front of Jean Toll, the former Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. Do you believe the attorneys for Murdaugh think they've got a better chance of the arguments of jury tampering in front of the full current state Supreme Court? In other words, Jean Toll, I believe if I remember correctly, she said there were some issues with the credibility of Becky Hill, but at the end of the day, she didn't think there was jury tampering. But do you think Dick Harpootlian and company stand a better chance in front of more judges overall, Luke?
I do. Look, I mean, as much as we want our courts to be fair and impartial, I mean, no one can escape the saga of Murdaugh. So it's always in the back of your mind. But, the hearing, the retrial hearing presided by Justice Toll, there's camera, there's news, it does put a certain amount of pressure on the whole scenario. But, appellate courts, it's behind closed doors. You're listen to reasoned arguments. You hope that it's not just one decision maker. You've got several. So I think they have a better chance. But, honestly, you have the whole trial, which lends itself to appellate issues. The financial crimes would be one of them. Then you have the secondary motion for a new trial that was, again, more testimony and another judge making a decision that could be appealed. So it's another bite of the apple. So it's just more issues. It really was a gift that kept on giving for the defense. And again, like Lori said, one is really sexy and one is kind of standard. So it's a question of, do you sidestep all of it and just say, look, no harm, no foul, it was overwhelming evidence, or do you really pick this thing apart and make a point and say, fine, do it right, send him back, he's going to get convicted, see if you can do it the right way without the financial crimes and without a off-the-rails clerk of court deciding to take matters in their own hands.
Lori and Brian, I want to get your take on that as well. Do you think there's a better chance with all of the judges instead of one here?
I do. And, we got one decision maker with former Chief Justice Toll, like Luke said, in a public courtroom with all the media attention and the lights and the camera. And she's a brilliant judge. She has been for a long time, but no one's immune from that kind of pressure, behind closed doors, reading the briefs, looking at the transcript, the testimony will be critical. And we had the financial crimes issue. It is a standard issue. There's a lot of politics in this state. I know Lori talks about it a good bit. Judges are not immune from it. There's elections right now for sitting Supreme Court justices, right? And there's a lot of prior decisions. So politics swirls in South Carolina. It's a deep current. This Becky Hill thing is an outlier. It is a significant legal issue. It could be just, the court, if they understand they got a financial crimes issue that is error, but that's the state bulldozing that, pushing that through, right? And the judge allowed it, but the state was very prepared to try to have that come right with the double murder piece of that case. But then you have Becky Hill bomb. Well, guess what? Becky's no one's fault. It's not the state's problem for trying to force that through. Becky's Becky. So it may be a situation where they need to do a reset for a myriad of reasons, but then Becky is not the state's problem, not the defense's problem. Becky's just Becky, and it may allow for people to have clean hands and allow what is proper, which is a reset on this case.
And Lori, clearly, Gene Toll has some issues with the credibility of Becky Hill here. So again, I ask you, one judge or the whole state Supreme Court?
Justice Toll specifically said, I do not find you credible. I mean, that was a point-blank statement of hers. And anytime you have more than one judge looking at it, I think that gives you a better chance. But in this particular case, we're talking about the two different avenues for appeal. With the financial crimes, you actually have to say that Judge Newman did something wrong. And I don't know that anybody wants to say that Judge Newman did something wrong. Nobody wants to overturn and leave that as his lasting legacy. When you get to Becky, as Brian?
Brian.
Thank you. As Brian said, it becomes a nobody's fault. We can just appeal it, and we can grant this appeal based on it being nobody's fault except for Becky's, and she's not a party to this case. So I think that's absolutely correct. Will they do it? It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see. I think that Justice Toll got the standard of proof wrong. I think she misread the case and misread what the Supreme Court had done. And I think that if the Supreme Court actually comes in and does what they should do, they'll correct her interpretation of the case and put the burden back on the state where it should be instead of on the defense.
At the end of the day, Lori, do you think the state Supreme Court, I know it's early, it's 2 months away, do you think the state Supreme Court, hearing arguments for a new trial, will rule in Murdaugh's favor?
I don't know if they will, but I know that they should.
Why?
Because you've got the financial crimes. That is a tremendous mistake in this case. And any defense lawyer would be jumping up and down over that. It definitely taints a jury when they hear all of these evidence about what a horrible human being he was. And truly, he was a horrible human being. But then you had Becky in there, and if Becky talked to even one juror, if she mentioned anything about this case, based on the case law and how I interpret it, and I hope the Supreme Court will as well, if there's any sense of it, the communications with the jurors, if they were about lunch or anything that the jury needed, that's fine. But when you start talking about the merits of the case at all, whether to believe him or not, that is tampering, and it should be overturned.
Luke, your take on this?
I don't think they will overturn it, but I think they should. And you know, the next question, I mean, South Carolina is a small pond. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be signing their name on an opinion that overturns something for this guy. But, you know, whether it gets appealed up higher, you know, you've got, that could have some traction. I mean, you've got, if there's legs on the jury tampering issue, I mean, that is, the province of the jury is the most, you know, sacrosanct, like untouchable area. I mean, lawyers can be bad, prosecutors can be bad, but the jurors just are supposed to back there in their room, have no influence. And so it's the type of issue that if there is that credible allegation, and there already is just baked into this, would a higher court take that up and say, you know what, I want to look at it because you really shouldn't be doing that? Possibly. Probably more likely to take it up on that issue than something as mundane as prior bad acts or financial crimes coming into this case.
Brian, a new trial or not?
I think, yes, new trial, but only because of Becky Hill. I think these very strong traditional 404B issues, bad character evidence, these financial crimes, I mean, as we've discussed, the jury couldn't find him credible when he's saying, yes, I'm a liar and I steal from my clients, but by the way, believe me when I say I didn't do this terrible thing to my family. So I think this does give the Supreme Court an out. I think Lori's right on point with Judge Newman's legacy. He's revered in this state. He's a brilliant, you know, jurist. I think we all felt he made a mistake letting the financial crimes in. So I have faith in the courts. I think this Becky situation will allow them to do the right thing on this case.
I know these are arguments before the state Supreme Court in February, but could attorneys for Murdaugh trot out a surprise witness in front of the state Supreme Court or a deposition of some sort for the court?
No.
No, they can only hear what's in the record. The record is done. Everybody's filed their stuff. I mean, the whole hearing in front of Justice Toll about Becky was just like a brand new, you know, testimony of things that were allowed to come in on this particular issue, because that particular issue didn't come out until after the trial. So that again was a gift, but that's it. It's closed. It's briefed. You're not getting new testimony. They're not going to accept new affidavits. It is what it is.
All right. I want to ask all three of you your take on this. Why the continued fascination with the Alex Murdaugh case? Brian, why the continued fascination?
Prominent lawyer, alleged to murder his family, admits to doing terrible things, but not the most, murdering his family, not patricide. So, I mean, and it's just a once in a lifetime story. And then the Becky Hill thing at the very end is just honestly fits with how crazy this whole thing is. So it's unexpected, but kind of expected. So that's the fascination.
Luke?
I just think from entertainment value, why the world is so obsessed with this is just people love to see someone who had everything just have a horrific come down. And that's really what it comes down to. And it's sexy, it's salacious, it's horrible, but people just can't seem to get enough.
Lori?
I think that at the beginning of it, it was because of the murder of his children. I think people were interested in that. But then it just kept on giving. It was the case that kept on giving. There was something new every day. And people watch this trial day to day, gavel to gavel watching of this trial. So it has the prominent lawyer, the takedown of the lawyer, the financial crimes are extremely interesting, the murder of the child, who was actually not a great person, poor Maggie, who's supposed to be the innocent. It has a little bit of everything for everybody. You could not create a better miniseries. You really couldn't.
Lori Murray, Luke, Brian Shealy, criminal defense attorneys. Guys, as always, thank you so very much. Those arguments in front of the state Supreme Court will be coming up in February. Of course, we'll be following this story between now and then. We'll keep you updated both on air and online at WLTX.com and right here on WLTX Plus.